Hey, welcome guys, to this latest new 2023 series named Logic Building Powerhouse with JavaScript Programming, in which we will solve the programming puzzles with one or many methods. The left side one window is VS Code, in which we will write code, and in the right side window, that is browser-based JavaScript console, in which we will run our JavaScript code. So here in this first chapter, the problem statement is this one: create a function that adds n numbers like 1 plus 2 plus 3 and so on up to n numbers. There are always many ways to solve programming problems in any language, so the main thing is logic development. That's why we created this Powerhouse series in JavaScript. So let's write our first function to achieve the desired output as addition of n numbers. Here I will show you 3 ways to solve this problem. In the first method, we will use the for loop and iterate loop up to n times, which is n number, and we'll add each time. In second method, we will use recursive function or method, in which function call itself it is called recursion of loop. And in the third method, we will use mathematics formula like function and so on. And yeah, let me do this word wrap in the VS Code so you can see properly in the window. Let's write this function, which has name add, and let us give input parameter as n, and inside this curly brackets, which is this body of the function, and that let's define the total variable and assign the 0 value to that variable. And let's create the for loop and create local variable I with initial value as 0 and semicolon, and in the condition as I less than or equal to the n, which is input parameter passed, and after that semicolon and I plus plus. And inside this for loop, let's make expression as total is equal to total plus with the I variable, so each time I will be increment with each iteration and it will add to the total, so total variable will be like the accumulator of the all I iterations, which is up to n times. So finally we will get the total, and in return statement we can return the total variable for this function. And let's test with console log with different inputs as 10, 5, 4 and 8, so we are getting appropriate outputs in the console accordingly. And let me put this code in browser JavaScript console to run it, and we are getting output as 55, 15, 10 and 36. Let me clear the console. So with this method you can clear the console as console.clear and empty parenthesis. Let me comment out this code for the first method so we can test the second method only. And in the top let me write as in comments as method 1, so we can identify easily the code block that it performs when code will grow in more lines and more size. Now we are going to write a function for the same problem statement with recursion. So recursion means the function calls itself. Also giving comment as method 1, as for loop, and method 2 as recursion, and comment for second code block like this. And let's make a function which takes n as input parameter in its body, as if the statement as input parameter is equal to 1, which will return 1 value. After that we can simply return as n plus with the calling function itself again with the input parameter as n minus 1. The logic is adding each number in descending order from n to 1 with recursion. Let's again check and test with console log with different inputs as 10 and 5 and 4 and 8, so we are getting appropriate outputs in the console accordingly. And let me put this code in browser JavaScript console to run it, and we are getting output as 55, 15, 10 and 36. Let's clear the console again. Now let me show you why we have used browser-based JavaScript console to run the code instead of JS file and VS Code. Here let's define n variable as a prompt method to ask the user which number he or she wants to put in. After that we are calling the function and should get output accordingly the input which have given by the user. But hey, wait! We have given input as 4 and it is showing output as 46, so what is happening here that is being interesting? So here the thing is happening. As we have given input in a prompt that is going to store in a variable n, that is string type assigning. Here in the console, let me write n and hit enter and see the output as 4 with inverted commas, so it is the sign that is showing that is string value. Also clear this thing, let's write as typeof n and see the output as string we are getting. Let's use parseInt to n variable and typeof now, then we will get a number for same. Now let me add parseInt function in the code and test it out for the same, and now see the input string from prompt is converted to number. And also let me copy the code from VS Code to the browser console, and first let me clear the console and see now we are getting 10 output for the input value of 4. Now let me comment out our second method code, and let's work on method 3, in which we will use a mathematical formula or expression to achieve the same. Let's create another function which takes n as input parameter, and inside this body return expression in which n plus 1 is parenthesis, so it will give priority in execution, and that n plus 1 is divided by 2, and after that it will multiplies to n. Now let's copy-paste console log for same input from second block and put it here, and let me uncomment to this console log statements. And now after clearing console and the browser-based console, and after that let me put code here to run it, and we are getting output as 55, 15, 10, and 36. Now let us rename the n variable in the third block as n2. And remove these console log statements from here, and also remove from the second block and from the first code block as well. Now let's also uncomment the second code block and removing prompt statement for now from here. Now let's rename the n variable to the n2 here in the second code block, and let us say n3 for the third block, and also replace n to n1 for the first block to understand things easily like this. Now we are going to compare the time of execution for all of these three methods. For that time comparison, we can use console.time, and inside that the string is named to identify the code block. Let's give that name for loop for the first block. And here in the first code block, let's run the function using calling the function inside the console log, so we can get the output directly in the console.log, and after that we can put it as console.timeInd with the same name as text as for loop to get the execution time. Now let's do console.time for the second block as recursive loop named, and removing this add call from here, and let me copy paste these two lines of console log and console time inline from the first block, and let me put here for the second block and rename the function as add2 instead of add to differentiate it, and also rename the console time end with recursive loop text. Now let us rename the function from add to add3 in the third code block of mathematics method, and also copy paste these two lines of console log and console time end, and also in the first console.time, and in that also rename the text as math loop for getting the time of execution. Let us now put the whole code inside the browser-based console and run the code by pressing the Enter key, and see here we got the result as time executed by each code block as for loop and recursive loop and math loop. And we got the result as, let me zoom in and see that the time of for loop is getting as 0.11 milliseconds, and for recursive loop is 0.047 milliseconds, and for math loop is 0.19 milliseconds, but it seems cache stored for the console, so let me clear cache of that console. Now we are getting the time for the for loop as 0.12 milliseconds, and for the recursive loop is 0.05 milliseconds, and for the math loop is 0.03 milliseconds. So the summary is that for loop is taking more time as it is iterating n times, and it is a slower method compared to these two other methods. And yeah, here as it is shown in the picture, it is my typo mistake as the method 2 is slowest. So please consider that method 1 is the slowest instead of 2, and the maths method, that is quite impressive as low execution time with one-line code, so that is the speedy than other methods, so that is the power of mathematics and the programming. So math helps incredible way to us in the programming world to do more fast way in the running when the big lines of code are there in the real world scenarios. Thank you for watching this video and subscribe to support this channel for more videos. See you in the next video.